So, if you've been part or are part of any, I suppose, pro EU Facebook group, Twitter, whatever, you've probably seen in the past couple of days the absolute sheer panic, the realization from the Telegraph that oh no, we're going to rejoin the EU faster than anyone ever predicted. Hey, oh no, panic at the Telegraph, you know. And of course, obviously, this is the direction we are going. We've had for the past 2 weeks now, we've covered all those polls, not only of just like, random sections across the country. We've had people in the red wall. We've had ones even focusing on people who voted leave. And more people are coming to the realization that Brexit has not worked. It was never going to work. And the promises that the Brexiteers made during the Leave campaign and even since then have not, will not, never come to pass. Why? Because it was based on a fantasy idea. If you've ever seen the South Park episode of the Underpants Gnomes, bizarre segue, I know, but hey, this is, we'll see the point. They chase these gnomes and they go, well, hang on, guys, why are you stealing underpants? And he says, oh, well, you've got to see our 4-point plan. And it is point 1, find underpants. Point 2, steal underpants. Point 3, question mark. Point 4, profit. And the thing is, it's been exactly the same for the Eurosceptics and even the Brexiteers now for years. They have talked, oh my God, if we leave the EU, it'll be fantastic. It'll be great. It'll be amazing. It'll be absolutely wonderful. We can do all these fantastic, amazing things. We're not going to really tell you exactly what these fantastic, amazing things are that we want to do because, you might not want to do them. We might not be on the same page, because we're, free market libertarianism. You might not like our ideas. Certainly no one liked Liz Truss's ideas a whole lot. And so we are starting to see that this realization that you've talked at Brexit, you've done Brexit, but now what? And that was always going to be the case. Even back at this referendum, we said, in Brexit, you are going to do this. If you do this, which is probably half the time meant leaving a EU institution or leaving, something that was, sort of EU based, there are going to be these consequences. How do you intend to solve these consequences which are going to be made? And of course, the reaction came back as, oh, that's just Project Fear. Well, very quickly, Project Fear has turned into Project Reality. And today we're going to go over this piece in the Telegraph because honestly, most people from what I've seen have just looked at that piece of, oh no, we're going to rejoin. I've seen very few people actually go over what's actually covered in the thing, and it's hilarious. But anyway, we're going to go over that today because, oh my, it is fun. it is fun. I can tell you that. So, as always, before we go diving into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and our update link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, guys, thank you very much for supporting all the channel and all the help that you do show. Those ways, like I say, please do remember to ring the bell as well. And as always, thank you very much for all the help and support that you do show the channel. So, on we go with this. So, Britain is going to rejoin the EU far sooner than anyone now imagines. Let's crack on with this, shall we? Let's not beat about the bush. Brexit has become the madwoman in the country's attic. What a way to describe Brexit. Brexit is just a madwoman in the attic. Okay. But I think even this just goes to show how, how even other conservatives thought about Brexit and then never really thought about the consequences or what they had to do after. You know, it's that step 3, guys. You can't just go to do the thing, then profit. There's this massive gap in between about how you get to that, you know, that profit promisey land, that profit fantasy land. That's why we always said Brexit was just, most of it was just all fantasy and unicorns, because it was all made up of crazy fantasy based ideas about a UK that had never even existed to begin with in the first place. So, back to it. So, Brexit has become the madwoman in the country's attic, demonized, its spirit crushed. It looms over the UK like Mr. Rochester's wife, Bertha Mason in Jane Eyre. And of course, Bertha, who sets fire to her husband's bed and rips up Jane's wedding veil, cannot be blamed for all the chaos that she causes. A rebellious force of nature, she is driven to insanity by repression and neglect. So too has Brexit been turned into a national psychodrama. With no plan to unleash its potential, it can only fester, stoking tensions in Northern Ireland and and strangling small firms with red tape. But we told you this. We told you this back in 2016. We told you what the consequences would be. And your response was, don't worry, it'll be fine. There was never a plan for what to do with Brexit. Even Brexiteers right now, there is a bit of a split happening. Even among the Brexiteers about what direction do you take Brexit in at the moment, which is, again, hilarious to watch. But no one wanted to define, you know, after you do Brexit, then what do you do? This is what the problem is with these Brexiteers. They cannot come to terms with the fact of what they have done, because in their minds, you do Brexit and somehow, magically, it all comes together. That has not happened. Anyone who complains, who is a Brexiteer and complains about the failure of Brexit, this is on you. This was your project. You are the ones who are responsible for it. No one else. And it is about time that became abundantly clear, because I'll tell you what, the British public is catching on to the amount of fantasies that were spoon-fed to them. We have seen it already in the polls. So, back to it. It is time for the Leave camp to start saying the unsayable. The Tories have made such a hash of Brexit that the project is probably now unsalvageable. Oof. Given Labour's Europhile disposition, the window to lay the foundations for Brexit Britain was always limited to the Conservatives' current reign. Now the end is nigh, and almost nothing has been achieved. But I would have to ask the person, what exactly did you want to achieve? Because you never spelled out what you wanted to do. What were your goals with Brexit? What was the grand master plan with Brexit? And as we said always, there was no policy attached to Brexit. People had no idea. And even the Leave campaign knows that if they had start attaching, oh yes, we do Brexit and then we do this, that might have turned people off. That might have massively turned people off for wanting to do this. Because I'll tell you now, this EU reform and revocation bill, I don't think it's popular as the Conservatives seem to think. And as we've said before, your average voter does not care about regulation. They should do. And we've argued that point many times when it comes to workers' rights and all that stuff. And Labour is right to say, hey, all these workers' rights that we have taken for granted, most of them are EU laws. If this bill goes through, you could lose hundreds of thousands of hard fought for rights that you have taken for granted for years. And Labour are right to bring that up. And of course, we go back to the Leave campaign about, oh, don't worry, we'll protect all these rights and regulations. Don't worry, we'll maintain these high standards. Well, guess what? The Brexiteers are certainly not the first people you would go to about protecting high standards and regulations. That has not been their goal at all. Are you going to bring this up? I don't know if they will, but we'll see. Anyway, back to it. So, nowhere is this clearer than in Northern Ireland. The EU and the UK may have agreed this week to continue, quote, the scope working to solve the dispute over the protocol, even if the UK camp has admitted that, quote, gaps remain. Privately, however, it is acknowledged that Brussels has no intention of making anything more than the most cosmetic tweaks. These aren't cosmetic tweaks. These are highly technical things that can be sorted out through negotiation. So that's a bizarre way to put it, but you continue living in your fantasy land about that. Crack on with that. Anyway, back to it. Its strategy is to play for time until Labour, which it calculates will be an even softer touch, comes to power. Oh. Yeah, bizarre to say the least, but there you go. That's not their plan at all. They've said they want to solve these problems as quickly as possible, because even the EU has acknowledged that yes, there are problems, but they need to sit down and solve these problems. It has been your party, your Brexiteers, who have refused to sit down and negotiate. But of course, as we've said before, any negotiation seen by the Brexiteers, as we've seen there, any negotiation is considered to be capitulation. So, the amount of political energy that continues to be expended on the Northern Ireland impasse underlines the painful fact that Brexit failed at the first hurdle. Okay, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But remember, it was the Brexiteers. It was the Brexiteers who said Northern Ireland is not going to be a problem. There is video of Kate Hoey, the Leave Labour representative, saying, oh, don't worry about Northern Ireland. It's not going to be a problem. It's just... yeah. Anyway, the political class, I love it, trying to get in the class struggles, okay? The political class never got beyond treating it as a damage limitation exercise. But that's what it was. But okay, never mind. Do you think that there wouldn't have been damage if it had been, quote, done properly? How would have you have done it properly to make sure this wasn't a damage limitation exercise? But there you go. Almost 7 years after the referendum vote, the focus is still not on exploiting its benefits, but on intractable technical deliberations in which, frankly, most people in the UK mainland lost interest. I agree with you, but this is important. Those technical deliberations are important. That's what makes the border works. If you have these agreements in place around these technical discussions, that's how it happens. And one of the things I am really looking forward to, I cannot stress how I am getting so geeking out over the possibility of it happening. But the possibility of Conservatives actually talking about regulation or bringing in regulation. I cannot wait to see the gears turning in the Brexiteers' mind as they try to work out, should we support this or not? Because it will underline the exact reasons as to why then they made that pitch to leave the EU was to get rid of all these regulations. That's why we see the EU reform bill. That's why we have not seen them exploiting any benefits, because there are no Brexit benefits. But back to it. Indeed, the clock has totally run down on what were always the half-baked efforts set out by a tangible long-term vision of Britain post-Brexit. There never was a long-term vision. There was never a vision beyond, okay, we've done Brexit. Now what? That was it. That was always it. Why aren't you criticizing them for that? You should be. But mind, even the Leave campaign was exactly the same way. That now you're saying it should be the Leave campaign up to calling out the Conservative Party. The Leave campaign was exactly the same way, and it was run by people who have been in charge, who have been at the forefront for the past 6 years. This is why I've said Brexiteers never, ever take responsibility for the damage that their precious project has caused. So, and a Westminster system still dominated by people who were never all that enthused about leaving the EU in the first place is only partly to blame. Yeah, because most of these people knew what troubles this would really cause. And unfortunately, they've been cowed into silence by people like you who are generally terrified. And I think I think there really needs to be a movement started in the Conservative Party to start being pro-EU. That would be a massive step forward. And I think if you got people like Rory Stewart maybe to lead that, that would be an interesting thing to see build in the Tory party. That would be very interesting to see how much support that type of political formation would work. And of course, it would cause a bit more chaos in the Conservative Party. And we're all about causing chaos in the Conservative Party. But anyway, never mind. Back to it. So never enthused about leaving the EU in the first place is only partly to blame. The grave reality is that even those ostentatiously committed to making the most of our new freedoms never really worked out how to do so, because they had no idea how to do so. You had Jacob Rees-Mogg being the Brexit Minister for Opportunities. He was the business secretary. He's never, ever put forward anything to benefit of these supposed freedoms. Even this EU reform bill is so bad. You have other Brexiteers looking at this bill and going, yeah, this is going to cause a lot of problems. We shouldn't really be doing this. Unfortunately, it's going to the Lords, and the Lords are going to have a lot to say about that. So we'll be covering that when that happens. But oof, boy. Anyway, back to it. So, in particular, the Brexit debate has fixated too much on questions of trade. Yes, because that was what Brexit, according to you guys, was meant to be all about. Brexit was all meant to be about opening up these new trade opportunities and making sure that there were no barriers. Boris Johnson saying that there would be no barriers to trade between the UK and the EU. That was, again, a complete lie by him and other Brexiteers as well, saying that we would never leave the single market and customs union. Only a fool would leave the single market and customs union. Of course, look, my favorite quote by one Daniel Hannan. Look, back to it. With Remainers endlessly outraged at the new barriers between the UK and the EU, and the government responding with the performative and awfully sloppily negotiated trade deals with countries such as Australia. I'm glad you're at least admitting that those deals are bad, and that, yes, those new barriers between the UK and the EU are bad, but it's not just Remainers that are outraged about this. We have covered companies that were pro-Brexit, that they themselves are now outraged at these barriers because they were told by the Leave campaign, by the Brexiteers that trade would continue as normal, that they would be fine. But instead, it hasn't, and it's caused them all kinds of headaches that they now have to deal with. It's now made them less competitive in our closest market, being the EU, and that is having big knock-on effects to our economy. So it's not just Remainers that are outraged about these new barriers. So in contrast, they continue with almost no attention has been paid to the opportunities around innovation, a chance to reinvent the country as a science superpower, for example, and create a world-leading regulatory environment for tech firms that would have, over time, diminished Remainers' narrow assumptions about the economic impact of leaving. When the government launched its new science program to get all these scientists to come to the UK because, hey, we're out of the EU now, shouldn't all these scientists want to come over? Not one scientist actually applied. We've seen the government cut science funding massively. Not being in the Horizon program has caused UK science to suffer massively. You want to talk about creating this leading regulatory environment? Well, guess what? There are things known as regulatory superpowers. Do you know who is a regulatory superpower? The EU. If one country changes its regulations, like us, no one else is going to follow. No one else. Because we are not a big enough market to be able to be a regulatory superpower. The EU is, which is why we've seen certainly the Conservatives, even Brexiteers, continuously to delay getting rid of the EU check marking system because, again, it's world recognized. Just, oh dear, that's, yeah. And again, the narrow assumptions about the economic impact of leaving, those were never narrow assumptions. They were always well thought out by experts who went, look, we can see what the damage to leaving the EU is going to be because it's basically simple maths. You are having X amount put into the economy from being in the EU. You take the UK out of that economy, depending on how hard or soft it is. That means that the numbers coming from the EU will be varying different amounts. And we work out it is going to be. And guess what? Most of those economists have been bang on track about the economic damage to the UK. Again, that is permanent damage done. But back to it. So, take the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, set to replace the EU's innovation-crushing GDPR. GDPR was never innovation-crushing. It was basically, hey, customers should have control over their data and who uses their data and how their data gets used. That's what really the core of GDPR was. And of course, doesn't seem to like the fact that customers can opt out of all this GDPR stuff. Even if we leave GDPR, this causes so many problems because now if you're a company that has let's say, owns and operates or hold EU data, if we leave GDPR, then under GDPR rules, all those EU companies that hold data in the UK for whatever reason, you can't suddenly be here. They can't do business here. It is going to be an absolute nightmare if this comes in. Trust me, you're going to see a lot of hits to the service industry. Absolutely. And remember, our entire economy is based on the service industry. So what do you think is going to happen there when that happens? It's a recipe for disaster. Anyway, he continues. It was only set out last May, and after endless delays and distractions, there is little hope of getting anything workable passed before the next election. With 2 years at the most until the next election, It would be impossible now for the Tories to launch a wholesale review of regulation to jumpstart groundbreaking research or exploit our freedoms from state aid rules to change the funding specific to funding specific projects, even if they were minded to. Well, what stopped them in the first place? What stopped them in the first place? The Tories, as you've said, it's been 7 years since the referendum. What's been stopping them? It's been 3 years at this point since Brexit. What's been stopping them? But anyway, we continue. Where are the Brexit Spartans? They don't seem to be interested in this big picture stuff. They are too busy down in the trenches fighting their last heroic battle, an attempt to force through a bill which aims to scrap 4,000 EU-derived laws by the end of the year. By failing to explain how specific sectors would benefit from divergence, however, many voters will be wondering what the point is, because they do not want to have that conversation. And also, again, when you talk about divergence, you've got to talk about what laws and regulations you are diverging from. And some of these laws are workers' rights laws, health and safety laws, worker protections. We went over, again, the Mogcast just a couple of weeks ago, where Jacob Rees-Mogg was like, hey, these chemical protections, which, help, a protectionist. And when you look at these regulations that he's talking about in this time period, there are protections that protect workers to make sure that those companies have the correct and up-to-date and regularly checked safety equipment, so that these workers who are working with these dangerous chemicals don't get, their skin peeling off. Or, this is why they do not want to have these conversations, because they are terrified, because they know that people, once you talk to people about regulations, most people understand the reason why. It's not that difficult, but they know it. So they do not want to have these conversations because, as you said earlier on, people in the UK do not care about regulations. They absolutely should. They absolutely should care more, but unfortunately, they do not. So, anyway, we continue. So, this is how Brexit dies. The received wisdom in Westminster is that it will nonetheless live on, not as a material thing, but as a political phantom, a subject that both parties avoid discussing at all costs, as the referendum's legacy stalks Parliament, deformed, unavoidable, forgotten. I fear that it is more likely that we will end up rejoining the EU sooner than many people think. Not for the reasons that the quote alt-Remainers believe. Alt-Remainers? What? I never knew we were all of a sudden become alternative Remainers. Okay? That these alt-Remainers believe, best expressed through their favourite cliche. No one voted to be poorer. Brexit has not been an economic disaster. GDP growth has not collapsed compared to our European peers. Yes, it has. We are far worse off compared to that. You look at, again, GDP growth compared to everyone else. Everyone else is doing pretty well. Of course, bar Russia. And of course, there are numerous other reasons as well that we are seeing our economy suffer because of Brexit. It's not just down to GDP growth. This is one of the things that I think we've really got to get at. There's more than just GDP growth to explain why an economy is doing good or doing bad. But there you go. That's, like I said, conversation for a different time. Where are we? So GDP growth is not compared collapse to our European peers, while foreign direct investment has remained strong. No, it hasn't. Foreign direct investment has gone down. That's gone down. That is a lie. The real problem is that nobody voted for nothing to change. nobody voted for nothing to change, then maybe you should have actually said what it was you were going to change at the time of the referendum, you know? But of course, you didn't. You didn't put forward what that was going to be, and that's your fault. But he continues, and Brexit has not brought about the kind of national reset that millions of people expected. Instead, it is beginning to look slightly rubbish, even pointless. Brexit was about having a national reset, but unfortunately, it was the type of national reset that people like Liz Truss wanted. They want to completely get rid of all these Eurosceptic nonsense. They want to turn the UK into this libertarian paradise. But no one wants that. Libertarianism is not a popular ideology here in the UK. Almost no one has ever heard of libertarianism. This is why I often spend a lot of time trying to explain to people what like the core tenets of libertarianism actually is. And most people in the UK do not want libertarianism because a core tenet of libertarianism would be to get completely rid of things like the NHS. Do you see why it's not popular in the UK? But back to it. So, if anything, the country is moving in a polar opposite direction to what Brexit was supposed to entail. Leaving the EU was meant to result in the UK taking back control of immigration policy. Instead, the government flees from a frank national conversation about the trade offs between the economy's inevitable appetite for cheap labour and the popular desire to limit numbers. Oh my word! Somewhere on the right being honest about the UK's need for cheap labour. My words. My word. What? Ooh. Put one on the scoreboard, chaps, because I've never seen that before. That being admitted before, especially in the Tory graph. Ooh. Brexit was meant to make our economy more competitive. Yet the government has increased taxes to a peacetime high as big businesses lobby obstructs deregulation efforts lest it increase competition. So, according to the Brexit campaign and the Leave campaign, this is what business wanted. They wanted to deregulate. Why on earth all of a sudden do they now not want to deregulate? You can see all the time Brexit and the Brexiteers are trying to change their story of what went wrong, what happened, why did Brexit fail? Oh, it's these reasons why. Again, he's already blaming the Brexit Spartans. Oh, they're too preoccupied. They're not taking a big picture view. Oh, Jesus, yeah. Talk about deluded is certainly a word I could use. The person that wrote this article, but there you go. And yeah, the government has increased competition. So Brexit's only major advantage to date that it has scathingly exposed the ineptitude of our country's political class. Yes, because really most of the Tory party did not want to do Brexit. They did not want to do Brexit at all. That is being made abundantly clear. They did not want to really do this. It was always this small pact, this small minority of Eurosceptics that were desperately to do it, and they've done their project. But now they're realizing that they actually have to do work and to put forward policies to do things. And they're not doing that. Even Brexiteers, people who advocate and vote for Brexit, aren't even following through. Instead, they're looking for anyone they can possibly blame instead of actually taking responsibility that maybe it's Brexit that is causing itself a lot of problems. The very thing that they did is actually causing a lot of problems. We've said it before and we'll say it again. Brexiteers and Brexit, backers do not take responsibility for the very thing that they pushed. So, unsurprisingly, the polls have shifted significantly in favour of Remain. While 54% now think that it was the wrong decision to leave EU, only 35% maintain it was the right decision. This may not mean that voters have any appetite for rejoining yet, but if we do so, it will not be as the result of an electable electorate elite conspiracy. Keir Starmer's insistence that the matter is settled may very well be genuine, but political sands are shifting in ways that make a closer relationship with the EU inevitable. The Labour Party, to secure its longevity over the next generation, still has to win back the Scottish, largely Remain voters with a big political gesture. Should support for Brexit continue to plummet in the Red Wall, a policy change may become irresistible. I wouldn't say irresistible, I'd say it'd be inevitable. And that shift is already happening. It's already happening. But there you go. So, what of the Tories? The party that little over 3 years ago received a historic mandate to, quote, get Brexit done. And yet they really haven't got Brexit done. You know, this is the party that was the core, that the people in the party that pushed for Brexit were the Tories. They were Tories through and through. So it's not anyone's fault in particular, but this is the way that it seems to be going. And it's just inevitable because these Brexiteers cannot be honest about their truth about the project of what they want to do, that they want to completely get all of these regulations. We've seen the EU reform and revocation bill. That's going to get stuck in the Lords potentially for quite some time. Hopefully, we can just see it not pass and it just die, which would be, of course, the best thing. But hey, we'll see what happens there. But anyway, what they've got to say about these Conservatives. So, if the first elephant in the room is that Brexit's days are numbered, then the second is that the Conservative brand cannot possibly survive such an ignominious outcome. Could we finally see the emergence of a new centre-right party that generally has a chance of taking power? As the revolution goes up in flames, this may be the only thing that can save it. Oh my word. So this person wants a new centre-right party. Bear in mind, we've got another faction, the Conservative Democratic Organisation, that says that the Conservatives are too centrist, that they need to go back more to the right. You can. This is why I constantly talk about it. There's going to be a Tory civil war. That point at the end. Oh, we need to be more right centrist. But you've got another faction that's saying, no, we need to be even more right wing. This article is completely insane. Now, it does get right a couple of things we saw in the article. A very interesting admission about, of course, Britain's addiction to sort of cheap labour. That is true. But then again, of course, we had minimum wage. And of course, we've got to talk about the effects of immigration and, of course, the facts that the Conservatives never did any proper infrastructure spending. Once again, this has nothing to do with the EU. That was the UK government not doing its job. And we've had a Tory government for the past 13 years. Who's at fault? It's not the EU. But anyway, yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that because that was painful. that was painful. So I do apologize for that. But yeah, certainly needed to be done sooner or later, to be honest. But yeah. So guys, like I say, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below there are links to all my to all the stuff to help support the channel, the YouTube thank you button, the Pony Club, the Buy Me Coffee link, Patreon, etc., etc. You know the drills by now. So, of course, guys, thank you very much for watching, and of course, we'll see you all next time.